twin homeless sisters see a helicopter crash with a woman and a baby inside. They run and yell, "She needs help!" A young billionaire watches everything from a distance, and what happens changes their lives forever. The noise came from the sky. Sarah woke up first. She always did. Her eyes opened in the darkness of the cardboard that served as a makeshift roof. And for a second she thought she'd dreamed it. But the rumble was getting louder. Much louder. "Grace!" She nudged her sister. "Grace, wake up." Grace mumbled and turned over, pulling the torn blanket closer. It was always like that. Sarah woke up. Grace wanted 5 more minutes. But today was different. The sound wouldn't stop. It was like a giant machine was falling from the sky. "Grace!" This time, Grace opened her eyes. The noise was so loud that both of them had to cover their ears. It felt like the whole world was breaking. The cardboard above them shook. "What is that?" Grace asked, frightened. Sarah didn't answer. She was already on her feet, pulling her sister by the hand. They ran out of the little shelter they had built between 2 dumpsters in the corner of the vacant lot where they'd been sleeping for 3 weeks. The sky looked strange. A red light was flashing up there, spinning, and the noise. The noise was like thunder, but it never stopped. "Over there," Sarah pointed. The helicopter was going down. The 2 girls stood still, holding hands, watching that huge thing come straight to the ground. The red light was spinning slower now. The engine made a horrible sound, like it was choking. Crash. The helicopter hit the ground about 150 feet away from them, on the other side of the lot. The earth shook. Pieces of metal flew everywhere. Black smoke started rising. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Sarah and Grace looked at each other. "We have to see if anyone's in there," Sarah said. Grace shook her head. "What if it's dangerous? What if someone's hurt?" It was always like that. Sarah wanted to help everyone. Grace was scared of everything. But in the end, they always did everything together. "Okay," Grace sighed, "but if there's fire, we run." They walked carefully through the vacant lot. The ground was full of rocks, old cans, and dry weeds. Sarah stepped on a broken bottle and winced, but she didn't stop walking. Grace held her hand tightly. The closer they got, the scarier it seemed. The helicopter was on its side, with one of the blades broken. The other still spun slowly, making a low, sinister sound. Grey smoke came out from several parts. "Someone's in there," Sarah whispered. Grace squeezed her hand. "How do you know?" "Because I can hear it." Grace listened carefully. It was true. There was a sound coming from inside the helicopter. But it wasn't an adult moaning. It was the sound of a baby crying. "Hello," Sarah shouted. "Is anyone in there?" The crying continued, loud and desperate. "Hello," she shouted louder. "We came to help." No answer. Only the baby's cry, growing stronger. Sarah and Grace looked at each other. A baby. They ran the rest of the way. The helicopter door was half open, but it was jammed by twisted metal. Sarah tried to peek inside. "Can you see anything?" Grace asked. Sarah stretched up to see better. What she saw scared her. A woman was slumped in the seat, blood on her forehead. Her messy blonde hair was tangled, and she wore a white blouse that was now filthy. Her eyes were closed, and she wasn't moving, and in her lap, pinned by the wreckage. "The baby!" Grace shouted. It was a tiny baby, wrapped in a blue blanket, and he was crying, a loud, desperate cry. "Ma'am!" Sarah yelled. "Ma'am!" The woman didn't reply. She didn't move. "She's unconscious," Sarah said, her voice shaking. The baby cried louder and louder. Sarah tried to push the metal aside to reach them, but it was impossible. Everything was too heavy and twisted. "We can't get them out," Grace said, starting to panic. Sarah smelled fuel getting stronger. It was dangerous. Very dangerous. "We need to call for help. Now." They backed away from the helicopter, the baby's cries echoing behind them. Sarah and Grace ran back across the vacant lot, slipped through the hole in the fence, and reached the avenue. It was nearly 2 in the morning, but there was still some traffic. Cars passed by with their headlights on. Sarah took a deep breath and ran into the middle of the street. "Help!" she shouted, waving her arms. "Help! There's a woman hurt." A blue car drove right past her, almost hitting her. The driver didn't even slow down. Sarah went back to the sidewalk and tried again. "Help us!" she shouted at another car. "Please! A helicopter crashed." 2 cars went by, 3, 4. No one stopped. Grace stood on the sidewalk, biting her lip anxiously. "No one's going to stop," she said. "Someone will stop," Sarah answered, but she was starting to worry too. She stepped into the street again. "Help! There's an accident. A woman and a baby are hurt." More cars passed. Sarah was getting desperate. Why wouldn't anyone stop? Why didn't anyone care? She waved at a large truck. The driver looked at her but didn't stop. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, tears in her eyes. "Someone needs help." Grace approached her sister. "Sarah, no, someone has to stop. There has to be someone who cares." As if the universe had heard, a black car slowed down. Sarah held her breath. Was it actually stopping? Yes. The black car stopped right in front of them. The window rolled down, and a man looked out. He had dark hair, wore a suit, and looked around 40. His eyes were full of concern. "What happened?" he asked. Sarah could barely speak from the surge of emotion. "A helicopter crashed," she said quickly. "On the other side of that fence. There's a woman stuck in there. She can't get out. And there's a baby, too." The man looked at the vacant lot, then back at the girls. "Did you see it happen?" "We were sleeping in there," Sarah explained. "The noise woke us up. The woman's name is Jessica. Jessica Martinez. She said her leg was broken." The man got out of the car immediately. He was tall and looked serious, but not scary. "I'm Michael," he said. "Let's go back there and check on her." He pulled out his phone and called as they walked. "Hello, I need an ambulance and the fire department urgently." He gave the avenue's address. "Helicopter crash, 1 injured woman and a baby." Sarah and Grace led Michael through the hole in the fence. As they neared the helicopter, the smell of fuel was much stronger, and there was a small flame starting underneath the machine. "Jessica!" Michael shouted. "An ambulance is on the way." Her voice came from inside, weaker now. "Thank you. But the fire? It's catching fire." Michael looked around quickly. The flames were growing. "They're trapped," he said, eyeing the twisted wreckage. "I need to wait for the firefighters." Sarah and Grace ran behind a dead tree when they heard the sirens approaching. First came the fire trucks, then the ambulance, then the police. Within minutes, the vacant lot was full of flashing red and blue lights. Michael ran to the firefighters. "There's an unconscious woman and a baby trapped in there," he shouted. "The wreckage is blocking them." The firefighters rushed in with their tools. Sarah and Grace watched from a distance as they worked to cut the twisted metal. "They did it," Grace whispered, when they saw the firefighters coming out with the baby in their arms. Logan was still crying, but he was safe now. Shortly afterward, the paramedics carried Jessica out on a stretcher. She was still unconscious, but breathing. "They're going to be okay," a paramedic told Michael. "You all arrived just in time. Another few minutes and—" Michael looked at the helicopter, now completely engulfed in flames. First came the firefighters, then the ambulance, then the police. Within minutes, the vacant lot was full of flashing red and blue lights. The paramedics placed Jessica on a stretcher and checked on Logan. Both were alive, considering the accident. "They're going to be fine," a paramedic told Michael. "You got here at the right moment." Michael turned to thank Sarah and Grace, but they were gone. Michael looked around, confused. "Where did they go?" "Who?" asked a police officer. "2 girls. They found the crash. They ran to get help." The officer looked around the empty lot. "I don't see anyone." Michael walked to where the girls had been, but found nothing, just small footprints in the dirt. "Girls!" he shouted. "Sarah! Grace!" Silence. The paramedics were placing Jessica into the ambulance. Logan was safe in a nurse's arms. "Sir?" called a firefighter. "Come with me, please. I need to ask a few questions about the accident." Michael glanced one last time around the area. Where were the girls? They had been crucial in saving Jessica and Logan. They had run out to call for help when no one else cared, and now they had vanished as if they never existed. On the other side of the fence, behind a pile of debris, Sarah and Grace were hiding. They had learned to hide quickly. It was a matter of survival. "Why did we run?" Grace whispered. Sarah didn't know how to answer properly. It was instinct. Whenever a lot of adults showed up, asking questions, wielding authority, it was always better to disappear before someone started asking where they lived, where their parents were, why they were alone. They heard Michael calling their names a few more times. Then they heard the sirens fade away. When everything was quiet again, they came out from their hiding place. The helicopter was still smoking. The firefighters had put out the fire. Everyone was gone, and they were alone again. "We did a good thing today," Sarah said softly. Grace nodded. "Yeah, we saved them." Jessica and Logan. Yeah, Jessica and Logan. They returned to their little spot between the dumpsters. The cardboard was still there, along with the torn blanket and the few belongings they owned. Sarah lay down and looked at the sky. The stars were twinkling. She kept thinking about Logan's blue eyes and about the man in the suit who had stopped his car to help. "Grace? Do you think they'll be okay? Jessica and the baby?" Grace snuggled closer to her sister. "I think so. That man seemed to know what he was doing." "Michael." "Yeah, Michael." Sarah closed her eyes. "It was good, right? Having someone stop." "It was," Grace agreed. "We shouted so much, and only he stopped." "But he stopped." "Yeah, he stopped." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as always. And for a few minutes before drifting off, Sarah didn't think about hunger or cold or the fear of tomorrow. She thought about how good it was to help someone, and about how Michael had looked at them as if they mattered, as if they truly existed. Across the city, Michael couldn't stop thinking about the two girls. It had all happened so fast. They appeared asking for help, led him to the crash, held the baby while he saved the mother, and then they vanished. Who were they? Where did they live? Why were they alone in the middle of the night? And why did they run away when he tried to thank them? Michael stared out the car window as he drove home. The city sparkled around him, full of lights. Somewhere out there, two little girls were sleeping in the open air. Two little girls who had saved two lives that night. Two little girls nobody seemed to see or care about. Except him, and Michael Carter couldn't get them out of his head. Michael couldn't sleep well. All night he kept thinking about the two girls who had disappeared. Who were they? Where did they live? And why had they run away when he tried to thank them? The next morning he made a decision. He'd go back to the vacant lot. Maybe they were still there. The helicopter had been removed overnight. Only burned marks on the ground and some scattered metal pieces remained. Michael parked his car by the avenue and slipped through the same hole in the fence he'd used the night before. The lot looked different in daylight. Less scary, but sadder. Trash everywhere, dry grass, graffiti on the walls. It was the kind of place people pretended not to see. Michael walked slowly, looking around. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe the girls wouldn't come back after last night's scare. Then he heard soft voices. He followed the sound and found Sarah and Grace crouched on the ground on the other side of a pile of debris. They didn't see him approach. Sarah held a piece of charcoal in her hand and was drawing something on the concrete floor. Grace sat beside her, watching. "No, like this," Grace whispered. "The ear is rounder." Sarah wiped it with her hand and drew again. "Better, better." Michael moved closer and saw what they were doing. On the ground, drawn with charcoal, there was a picture of a dog. It was simple but well made. Next to it, other drawings, a house with windows, a tree, a butterfly. "Good morning," Michael said softly. The two girls jumped in fright. Sarah dropped the charcoal, and they both got to their feet quickly, ready to run. "It's okay," Michael said, raising his hands. "It's me, Michael. From last night." Sarah and Grace looked at each other. Of course, they remembered him, the man in the black car who had stopped to help. "You came back," Sarah said, more a statement than a question. "I did. I was worried about you." Grace hid behind her sister. She always did that when she was nervous. "We're fine," Sarah answered. Michael looked around. He saw a little corner between two dumpsters where there was cardboard on the ground. Some old rags, a plastic bottle. That's where they slept. Do you live here? Sarah nodded. For now. For now. We move sometimes, when the security guards come to chase us away, or if weird people show up. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. 2 little girls, living alone in a place like this. Have you eaten today? He asked. The girls glanced at each other. Sarah shook her head. Yesterday we didn't either, Grace said quietly. Michael didn't hesitate. Let's get something to eat. Do you know a place around here? Sarah hesitated. Why do you want to help us? It was a direct question. Michael liked that. The girl wasn't naive. Because you helped me last night. And because... He paused, searching for the right words. Because everyone deserves a hot meal. Sarah studied his face for a few seconds. Then she nodded. There's a diner around the corner. The owner is kind of grumpy, but the food's good. They left the vacant lot together. On the sidewalk, Michael noticed how people looked at the girls. Quick glances, then looking away, as if they were invisible. The diner was small and simple. The owner, a heavy-set man in a stained apron, frowned when he saw the girls walk in. They can't stay here, he said to Michael. Why not? Michael asked calmly. Because they can't. They're homeless kids. Michael took a $50 bill out of his wallet and placed it on the counter. 3 plates of whatever's best. The man looked at the money, then at Michael, then at the girls. He sighed. Sit over there in the corner. They sat down at a small table near the window. Sarah and Grace were quiet, looking around with curiosity. It was obvious they didn't enter places like this often. Order whatever you want, Michael said. Really? Grace asked, her eyes shining. Really? They ordered burgers with fries and soda. When the food arrived, Michael noticed how they ate. Slowly at first, as if they couldn't believe it was real. Then faster, as if someone might take the plate away any moment. Is it good? He asked. Very, Sarah said, still chewing. It's the best food we've ever had, Grace added. Michael smiled. I doubt that. It's true, Sarah insisted. We eat very little. How do you usually get food? We ask people. Sometimes they give us something, sometimes not. And where do you shower? Brush your teeth. There's a gas station that lets us use the bathroom sometimes. The attendant is nice. Michael kept asking questions while they ate. He learned that Sarah was 7 and Grace was 6. They were sisters, not twins, just very similar. How long have you been living on the streets? Sarah paused her eating for a second. About 2 years. And before that? Where did you live? With our mum, Grace answered. In a small house. What happened to her? The girls went quiet. Sarah fiddled with a fry on the plate. She got sick, Sarah finally said. What kind of illness? I don't know the name. She started coughing a lot. Then she couldn't get out of bed anymore. Then... Sarah stopped. Grace continued. She died in her sleep. We woke up and she didn't wake up again. Michael felt his heart tighten. I'm so sorry. We stayed with her for a while, Sarah continued. We didn't know what to do. Then some men came and said we had to leave the house. Do you have any relatives, grandparents, uncles? We don't know anyone, Grace said. Mom said her family lived far away. What about your father? The girls looked at each other. We never met him, Sarah answered. Mom never talked about him. Michael nodded. 2 little girls alone in the world. No family, no home, no one to look after them. How did you learn to survive on your own? Mom taught us a lot before she died, Sarah explained. How to be polite to people, how not to accept anything suspicious from strangers, how to always stay together. She said we had to take care of each other, Grace added. No matter what happened, we'd always have each other. Michael observed the 2 girls. Despite the dirt and the torn clothes, the hard life, they had something special. They spoke politely, said please and thank you and cared about one another. Do you go to school? Sarah shook her head. We can't. We don't have an address. We don't have documents. But Mom taught us to read a bit, Grace said proudly. And to count it too. Really? Show me. Sarah looked around and saw a sign on the wall. She read slowly. Special offer, family combo. Very good, Michael said. and math. If you have $10 and spend 3, you have 7 left, Grace answered quickly. Michael smiled. Exactly. They finished eating, and Michael ordered dessert, chocolate ice cream for both. Why are you being so nice to us? Sarah asked as she ate the ice cream. Michael thought about his answer. Because you were brave last night. Many adults wouldn't have done what you did. We just did what we had to do, Sarah said. Not everyone would. Our mom always said we have to help when someone needs it, Grace explained. Even if we don't know them. Michael looked at them with admiration. How could 2 children who had lost everything still have so much kindness in their hearts? You're special, he said. Sarah lowered her eyes. We're not special. We're just us. You're special to me. When they finished eating, Michael paid the bill. The diner's owner even gave a small smile to the girls when they politely thanked him. On the sidewalk, Sarah and Grace stood there as if they didn't know what to do next. Do you want me to walk you back? Michael asked. Sure, Sarah replied. On the way back to the vacant lot, Michael thought about everything he'd learned. 2 intelligent, polite, courageous girls who had lost their mother, never met their father, and now lived alone on the streets. Who last night had saved 2 lives without thinking about their own danger. Who drew on the ground with charcoal to pass the time. Who shared the little they had. Who protected each other. When they arrived at the vacant lot, the girls said goodbye politely. Thank you for the food, Sarah said. It was really good, Grace added. You're welcome, Michael replied. Maybe I'll see you again. Maybe, Sarah said, but she didn't seem to believe it much. Michael went back to his car, but didn't leave immediately. He stood there, watching the girls go back to their spot between the dumpsters. 2 children who should be playing, studying, being protected by adults. Instead, they were alone, invisible to the world. But not invisible to him. Michael Carter had made a decision. Those girls would not stay alone for much longer. Michael spent the whole morning thinking about Sarah and Grace. Even after returning home, he couldn't get the image of them eating as if it was their last meal out of his head. And maybe it really was. 2 children living on the streets, completely alone. How could the world allow such a thing? But there was someone else he couldn't forget. Jessica, the woman from the helicopter. How was she doing? Was the baby okay? Michael picked up the phone and called the hospital. Hello? I'd like information about a patient who arrived early this morning, Jessica Martinez. Helicopter accident. 1 moment, please. The receptionist went silent for a few seconds. Yes, she's here. Are you a relative? No, I helped with the rescue. I'd like to know how she's doing. She's stable. Visiting hours are from 2 to 6 in the afternoon. Michael checked his watch, 1:30. Perfect. Thank you. An hour later, Michael was in the hospital corridor, looking for Jessica's room. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of medical equipment always made him uncomfortable, but today he had a reason to be there. Room 237. He knocked lightly on the door. Come in, said a female voice from inside. Michael opened the door slowly. Jessica was lying in bed, her left leg suspended in a device and her right arm in a cast. She had some cuts on her face, but she was awake and alert. Next to her, in a small bassinet, Logan slept peacefully. Jessica! She looked at him curiously. Yes, I'm Michael. Michael Carter. I helped with your rescue last night. Jessica's eyes lit up immediately. You're the man who got me out of the helicopter. Michael approached the bed. Actually, the firefighters rescued you. I just called for help. No, Jessica shook her head emphatically. The paramedic told me everything. You were the one who organized the rescue. If it wasn't for you, she looked at Logan. We'd both be dead. Michael pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. How are you both doing? Broken leg, fractured arm, some cuts, Jessica replied, touching her face. But I'm alive. Logan is perfect. The doctor said it was a miracle. It really was. Jessica looked at him warmly. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart. You saved our lives. Michael felt awkward with the gratitude. He'd done what any decent person would do. Actually, he said, the ones who really saved you were 2 little girls. Jessica frowned. What do you mean? 2 kids, Sisters, Sarah and Grace. They were sleeping in the vacant lot when the helicopter went down. They were the ones who ran to the avenue for help. Jessica was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Children. Yes, they're very young, about 7 and 6 years old. They saw the accident. They did, and they came to check. They found you and Logan trapped. You were unconscious, he was crying. They realized they couldn't get you out alone and ran to call for help. Jessica put a hand on her chest, moved. My God. They stood in the avenue yelling for help. Several cars just kept going. When I stopped, they told me everything, took me right to you. Where are they now? Jessica asked. I need to thank them. Michael hesitated. They live on the streets, asked Jessica. What do you mean? They're orphans. Their mother died 2 years ago. They have no one. Jessica's eyes widened. 2 children alone on the streets. Yes. They sleep in a vacant lot, beg for food, survive as best they can. Jessica started to cry. Silent tears rolled down her face. 2 little angels, she whispered. 2 angels who have nothing, yet they ran to save us. Michael nodded. They are special. I need to see them, Jessica said urgently. I have to thank them. Jessica, you need to rest. No, she interrupted. You don't understand. These girls saved my son, saved my life. I won't be at peace until I thank them in person. Michael saw the determination in her eyes. He recognized that look. It was the same look he saw in the mirror when making big business decisions. They're shy around strangers, he said. Please, Jessica begged. Bring them here. I'm begging you. Michael looked at Logan, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet. Then at Jessica, tears in her eyes yet determined. All right, he finally said. I'll go get them. When? Michael checked his watch. 3:30 in the afternoon. Now. An hour later, Michael was back at the vacant lot. He found Sarah and Grace in the same spot, crouched on the ground. This time they were playing with some colorful stones they'd found. Hi, girls. They looked up, surprised. Michael, Grace smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her smile. Are you okay? We're fine, Sarah answered. Thanks for the food today. You're welcome. Michael crouched beside them. Listen, I have a question for you. The girls paid attention. Would you like to see how the woman and the baby from the helicopter are doing? Sarah and Grace exchanged glances. Are they okay? Grace asked. They are in the hospital, and the mother, Jessica, really wants to meet you. Why? Sarah asked suspiciously. To say thank you. You saved her life and the baby's life. Sarah bit her lip. We didn't do anything special. To her, you did everything. The girls were quiet, thinking, hospitals are for rich people, Grace whispered. No, Michael replied. Hospitals are for people who need medical care, like Jessica. What if they don't want us to come in? Sarah asked. You'll be with me. I'll take care of you. Sarah looked at Grace. Grace gave a small nod. Okay, Sarah said. We'll go. The ride to the hospital was quiet. Sarah and Grace sat close together in the back seat, looking out the window with curiosity and nervousness. Have you ever been to a hospital? Michael asked. Once, Sarah replied, when Mom got really sick, but we didn't go inside. They said we were too young. Michael felt anger toward whoever denied them entry while their mother was dying. Today you're going in, he promised. At the hospital, a few staff members glanced at the 2 grimy girls in torn clothes. Michael stared back at them until they looked away. Room 237, he said in the elevator. Sarah and Grace were nervous. Grace held her sister's hand tight. What if she doesn't like us? Grace whispered. She'll like you, Michael said. Trust me. He knocked on the room door. Come in. Michael opened the door and entered first. Jessica, I brought the girls. Jessica tried to sit up straighter in the bed, excited. Where are they? Michael motioned for Sarah and Grace, who walked in slowly, intimidated. Jessica looked at them and immediately began to cry. It's you, she said, her voice trembling. You're the ones. Sarah and Grace froze near the door, not sure what to do. Come here, Jessica asked gently. Please. The girls approached slowly. Jessica extended her good hand toward them. I'm Jessica, and you're Sarah and Grace. How do you know our names? Grace asked. Michael told me. Jessica looked at both of them fondly. He told me that you saved me. Sarah lowered her eyes. We just did what we had to do. No, Jessica said firmly. You did so much more than that. She took Sarah's hand gently. You risked your lives to save two people you didn't even know. You ran out in the middle of the night, shouting for help when nobody else cared. Now Jessica was crying openly. You saved my baby. You saved my life. How can I ever thank you for that? Sarah and Grace didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to them like that. You don't need to thank us, Sarah mumbled. Yes, I do. Jessica squeezed her hand. And I'll carry that gratitude in my heart forever. Grace stepped closer. Is the baby okay? Jessica smiled through tears. Do you want to see? She pointed to the bassinet. Logan was awake now, looking around curiously. He's so cute, Grace said softly. You want to hold him? The girls looked at each other, startled. We've never held a baby before, Sarah said. I'll show you, Jessica replied. Carefully, Jessica instructed Sarah on how to hold Logan. The baby stayed quiet in her arms, staring at her face with big blue eyes. He's smiling, Grace said in amazement. He really was. Logan was smiling at Sarah. He recognizes you, Jessica said emotionally. He knows you saved him. Grace reached out and Logan grabbed her finger. His smile grew even bigger. Hi, Logan, Grace said softly. We met yesterday, but you were crying then. Logan let out a little baby laugh. Sarah and Grace looked at each other, enchanted. He likes us, Sarah said. Of course he does, Jessica replied. You're his guardian angels. The girls spent the next hour playing with Logan. Jessica told them about the accident. She'd been returning from a medical appointment when the helicopter started having problems. I thought I was going to die, she said. And that Logan was too. When I woke up in the hospital and found out 2 kids had saved us, she shook her head. I thought it was a dream. It wasn't a dream, Grace said. We were really there. You were, Jessica agreed. My little angels were there. For the first time in their lives, Sarah and Grace felt important, valued, as if they truly mattered. Jessica asked a nurse to bring juice and cookies for the girls. She treated them like they were the most important people in the world. Do you want me to tell you a story? Jessica asked when Logan started getting drowsy. Sure, Grace said, settling into the chair by the bed. Jessica told them the story of a brave princess who saved an entire kingdom. Sarah and Grace listened, spellbound. The princess was small, Jessica said, but she had a big heart. And sometimes, the people with the biggest hearts make the biggest differences. Sarah felt something warm in her chest. No one had ever called her brave. No one had ever said she had a big heart. When Logan fell asleep, Jessica held both girls' hands. I want you to know something, she said seriously. You are special, very special. No matter what anyone says, you are precious. Sarah felt tears welling up. Do you really think so? I'm sure of it. Jessica squeezed her hand. And I'll never forget what you did for me and Logan. When it was time to leave, Jessica kissed both girls on the forehead. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving my family. In the hospital corridor, Sarah and Grace walked silently beside Michael. How do you feel? He asked. Different, Sarah answered. Different how? Sarah thought for a moment. Like we matter. Grace nodded. Jessica said we're special. You are special, Michael said. In the elevator, Grace asked, will we see her again? If you want to. We do, Sarah said quickly. When they left the hospital, the sun was setting. Sarah and Grace seemed different. They walked with straighter shoulders. They smiled more. For the first time in their lives, someone really saw them. Not as homeless kids, not as a problem, not as something to ignore. As precious people, as angels. And that feeling was better than any food, better than any shelter. It was the feeling of belonging in the world. The ride back to the vacant lot was quiet. Sarah and Grace sat in the back of Michael's car, still processing everything that had happened at the hospital. Their eyes sparkled in a different way, as if a small light had switched on inside them. Jessica is really nice, Grace said softly. Yeah, Sarah agreed. And Logan is so little. Michael glanced at them in the rearview mirror and smiled. Did you like him? A lot, Grace replied. He laughed when I tickled him. And when Sarah sang that song, he got really calm, Grace added. Michael remembered. Sarah had sung a lullaby their mother used to sing for them. Her voice was sweet and in tune, and Logan had been mesmerized. When they reached the vacant lot, Michael stopped the car by the avenue. The girls got out slowly, as if they didn't want the moment to end. Thanks for taking us, Sarah said, with that politeness that always surprised Michael. It was really special meeting Jessica and Logan, Grace added. Michael looked at the two girls standing on the sidewalk. Even after spending the afternoon in a clean, welcoming hospital, they were returning to that place, sleeping on the ground between dumpsters with no one to care for them. Will you be okay? He asked. We always are, Sarah replied with a small smile. If you need anything, we know where to find you, Sarah said. Thanks for everything, Michael. They waved and walked toward the hole in the fence. Michael stayed in the car, watching until they disappeared. Then he drove home in silence, but he couldn't stop thinking. Michael lived in a large apartment downtown. It was modern, well decorated, with a view of the park. It had everything money could buy: expensive furniture, state-of-the-art appliances, art on the walls. But it was empty. He'd lived alone for 10 years, ever since his divorce. He worked a lot, traveled for business, had a few friends, but he always came home to an empty place. It had never bothered him before. Loneliness was the price of success, he used to think. But today, after seeing Sarah and Grace go back to that vacant lot, the apartment felt even emptier. Michael poured himself a glass of whiskey and went out to the balcony. The city shimmered below. Millions of lights, millions of people. And somewhere among all those lights, 2 little girls were getting ready to sleep on the ground. How could the world allow that? He thought about their lives, waking up every day without knowing if they'd eat, showering when they could, sleeping in fear, being invisible to everyone. And yet, when they saw a woman and a baby in danger, they didn't hesitate to help. Michael took a sip of whiskey and closed his eyes. The image of the girls wouldn't leave his mind. Sarah, always protecting her younger sister. Grace, shy but brave when necessary. 2 children who deserved so much more than what life offered them. He stayed up all night thinking. The next morning, Michael woke up with a certainty in his mind. He couldn't let Sarah and Grace keep living like that, not when he could do something to change it. Michael showered, got dressed, and went to the office, but he couldn't focus on work. His secretary, Margaret, noticed he was distracted. "Everything all right, Mr. Carter?" she asked. "Margaret," Michael said suddenly. "Do you have kids?" She looked surprised by the question. "Yes, 2 girls. What's it like, having children?" Margaret smiled. "Hard. Exhausting. Worrisome." She paused. "And the best thing in the world." Michael nodded. "Would you do anything for them?" "Anything," she answered without hesitation. During lunch, Michael stayed in his office. He spent time online, researching adoption, guardianship, legal processes. It was more complicated than he'd imagined, but not impossible. In the afternoon, he cancelled all his meetings and left. First stop, a children's furniture store. "Can I help you?" asked a friendly saleswoman. "I need to furnish a room for 2 girls," Michael said, "about 7 and 6 years old." "Sisters?" "Yes." The saleswoman led him to the children's section. Michael had never paid attention to such things before, but now he looked at everything with great interest. "These beds are perfect for sisters," the saleswoman said, showing 2 small wooden beds in a light finish. "And we can add this matching wardrobe." Michael liked it, simple but cozy. "I'll take them," he said. "And for decoration, we have some nice paintings, lamps." Michael chose everything quickly. 2 small bedside tables, a butterfly-shaped lamp, animal-themed pictures for the walls. "When can you deliver?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning, if you like." "Perfect." Second stop, a bookstore. Michael bought children's books, coloring books, colored pencils, storybooks, books to help them learn to read better. He remembered Sarah reading the menu sign at the diner, Grace talking about math, third stop, a toy store. He felt lost among so many options, dolls, games, puzzles. What did girls that age like? "Can I help?" asked a store employee. "I'm buying for 2 girls. They haven't had many toys in their lives." The employee smiled understandingly. "How old?" 7 and 6. She helped him pick 2 rag dolls, building games, simple puzzles, stuffed animals. "These teddy bears are favorites," she said, showing 2 brown plush bears. Michael grabbed both. "Perfect." Fourth stop, a children's clothing store. Michael looked around, intimidated. How would he know their sizes? Which clothes to buy? A saleswoman approached. "Looking for anything in particular?" "Clothes for 2 girls. They're about this tall," he gestured. "Just basic stuff. Pants, shirts, a jacket." She helped him choose simple, comfortable outfits. Jeans, colorful t-shirts, 1 dress each, coats, shoes. "For how long?" she asked. Michael thought for a moment. "Forever," he replied. Back at his apartment, Michael looked around. The guest room was perfect. It had a window facing the park. It was bright and airy. Tomorrow, after the furniture arrived, it would be Sarah and Grace's room, if they wanted it. Michael felt butterflies in his stomach. What if they said no? What if they didn't trust him? What if they preferred the streets? He shook his head. He couldn't think about that now. The next morning, Michael woke up early. The furniture arrived at 9. He supervised everything. The beds were placed on either side of the window, the wardrobe against the wall, the tables by each bed. The result was simple but cozy. A real bedroom for 2 girls who had never had one of their own. Michael placed the books on a small shelf, set the stuffed animals on the beds, hung the pictures on the walls. He organized the clothes in the wardrobe. When he finished, he stood in the doorway looking around. It was perfect. Now came the hardest part. Michael drove to the vacant lot with his heart pounding. What if the girls weren't there? What if they'd left? But they were there. Sarah and Grace were playing with the same colorful stones, sitting on the ground near the dumpsters. "Hi, girls." They looked up, surprised and happy. "Michael," Grace smiled. "How are you?" "We're good," Sarah replied. "Thanks again for the food the other day." "No problem." Michael took a deep breath. "Listen, I have a question for you." The girls paid attention. "Have you ever thought about having a room of your own?" Sarah and Grace looked at each other. "A room?" Grace asked. "With beds, a closet, toys, a place just for you." "We've dreamed about that," Sarah said quietly. "When Mom was alive, she promised one day we'd have a nice room." Michael felt his heart clench. "What if I told you that day is today?" The girls stayed quiet. "I prepared a room for you in my apartment," Michael continued. 2 beds, books, toys, all new. Sarah frowned. "Why?" "Because you deserve it. Because no one should live on the streets. Because—" Michael stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Because I want to take care of you." Grace started smiling, but Sarah still seemed suspicious. "For how long?" Sarah asked. "Forever, if you want." "And what do you want in return?" Michael admired her caution. She had learned to be wary out of necessity. "Nothing," he replied. "I just want you to have a chance to go to school, to play, to be kids." Sarah looked at Grace and then back at Michael. "Can we see the room?" "Of course." Michael's apartment was in a tall, modern building. Sarah and Grace were impressed by the elevator, the carpeted hallway, the shiny door. "You live here?" Grace asked in awe. "I do," Michael replied, opening the door. The girls walked in slowly, taking in the large living room, the modern kitchen, the view from the window. "It's really pretty," Sarah said. "Thank you. Want to see your room?" Michael led them down the hallway and stopped in front of the guest room door. "Close your eyes," he said. Sarah and Grace closed their eyes, smiling in anticipation. Michael opened the door. "You can open now." They opened their eyes and were silent for several seconds. Sunlight streamed into the room through the window. 2 beds with colorful blankets, teddy bears on each one, a shelf full of books, pictures on the wall. Grace was the first to move. She ran to one of the beds and picked up the teddy bear. "Is he mine?" she asked, eyes shining. "He's yours," Michael replied. Sarah walked slowly around the room, touching everything gently. The nightstand, the books, the butterfly-shaped lamp. "All this is for us?" she asked quietly. "Everything." Sarah stopped by the window. Below, the park stretched out, green and beautiful. Children were playing on the swings. "I can see the park," she said. "Yes, and you can go play there whenever you want." Grace was hugging the teddy bear, smiling. "Can I sleep here tonight?" Michael looked at Sarah. He knew she was the one who decided things. Grace followed her older sister. "Sarah," he asked, "what do you think?" Sarah stayed quiet for a long time, gazing out the window. "If we stay," she finally said, "you won't get tired of us." The question hit Michael like a punch to the gut. "Never." "What if we make a mess?" "I'll teach you how to clean up." "What if we eat too much?" Michael smiled. "I'll be happy to see you eating." Sarah turned to him. "Why do you want to do this?" Michael got down on one knee to be at her eye level. "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten," he said, "that there are good people in the world, brave people, and those people deserve to be taken care of." Sarah studied his face for a long moment. "Okay," she finally said. "We can try." Grace squealed in delight and jumped on the bed with the teddy bear. Sarah smiled, a small but genuine smile. "There's one condition," Sarah said. "Which one?" "We always stay together. If you change your mind about one of us—" "I'll never change my mind," Michael interrupted. "Never." That night, Sarah and Grace took their first hot bath in 2 years. Michael had bought nice-smelling shampoo, gentle soap, and soft towels. "Does the water ever run out?" Grace asked in amazement. "It doesn't," Michael laughed. They had dinner in the kitchen. Michael had ordered pizza. He wasn't much of a cook yet, but he could learn. "This is really good," Sarah said, biting into a slice. "Better than the diner?" Michael asked. "Better," Grace agreed. When it was time to sleep, the girls wore new pajamas and brushed their teeth with colorful toothbrushes. "Do you want me to turn the lights off?" Michael asked. Sarah and Grace looked at each other. "Could you leave the lamp on?" Grace asked softly. "Sure." Michael turned on the butterfly-shaped lamp. A soft yellow glow lit the room. "Good night, girls." "Good night, Michael," they replied in unison. Michael went to his room but couldn't fall asleep right away. He lay awake listening to the sounds of the house. For the first time in 10 years, he wasn't alone. From the girls' room, he could hear low whispers. "Grace. Do you think this is real?" "I think so." "What if it's a dream?" "Then it's the best dream we've ever had." "It really is." Silence for a few minutes. "Sarah?" "I like him." "Me too." "Do you think he likes us?" "I think so. He did all this for us." "Yeah, he did." More silence. "Grace?" "For the first time, I'm not afraid of tomorrow." "Me neither." Michael smiled in the dark. 2 girls who had lived on the streets, who had seen the worst of the world, were finally able to sleep in peace, in warm beds, with teddy bears, in a home where someone cared for them. For the first time in their small lives, Sarah and Grace were truly safe. And Michael Carter, a 40-year-old businessman who had been so lonely, finally found a purpose worth more than any business deal. He had found a family. Sarah and Grace were in the living room, putting together a puzzle on the floor, when the doorbell rang. "Who could it be?" Grace asked, looking at Michael. Michael went to the intercom. "Hello? Michael? It's Jessica." "Jessica Martinez." "Jessica!" Michael smiled. "Come on up. Apartment 12B." The girls jumped to their feet, quickly smoothing their hair and clothes. In the week they'd been living with Michael, they'd learned how to greet visitors politely. "It's Jessica," Grace said excitedly. "We'll see Logan again." "Let's see," Michael replied, opening the door. A few minutes later, Jessica appeared in the hallway. She was using crutches, but smiling. She was carrying several colorful bags. "Jessica!" Sarah and Grace ran to greet her. "Girls!" Jessica bent down carefully and hugged them. "How are you?" "We're great," Grace replied. Michael got a bedroom just for us. Really? I want to see everything. Michael helped Jessica inside. She looked around the apartment, impressed. What a beautiful place was Michael. Thank you. How are you doing? Where's Logan? I'm doing fine. My leg still hurts a bit, but the doctors say I can ditch the crutches soon. Jessica smiled. Logan's with my mom today. I thought it'd be better to come alone so we could talk. She placed the bags on the couch. I brought some things for the girls. Sarah and Grace approached curiously. Presents? Grace asked, eyes shining. Presents, Jessica confirmed. Open them. The girls opened the first bag. Inside were storybooks, with colorful covers and pretty illustrations. These are gorgeous, Sarah exclaimed, picking up a book about a daring princess. This one has animal stories, Jessica said, showing another book. And this one is about two sisters who go on lots of adventures. Grace picked up the sister book and hugged it. Just like us. Exactly like you. The second bag had clothes, colorful tops, jeans, a flowery dress for each. Jessica, you didn't have to, Michael began. Yes, I did, Jessica interrupted. These girls saved my life. It's the least I can do. But the third bag was the most special. Jessica opened it carefully and pulled out two handmade rag dolls. Sarah and Grace were speechless. The dolls were beautiful, handcrafted, with yarn hair and delicate dresses. One had dark hair like Sarah's, the other lighter hair like Grace's. Did you make them? Sarah asked in awe. I did. In the last 2 weeks while I was still in the hospital. I thought about you both the whole time. Grace took her doll and hugged it. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. What are we going to name them? Sarah asked. Whatever you want, Jessica answered. Sarah looked at her doll for a long time. Hope, she finally said. Hope, yeah. Because she reminds me that good things can happen. Grace looked at hers. Joy. Because that's how I feel when I look at her. Jessica smiled with tears in her eyes. Hope and joy. Perfect. The girls spent the rest of the afternoon playing with the dolls, reading the new books and trying on the clothes. Jessica and Michael stayed in the kitchen, chatting and watching. They look different, Jessica remarked. How so? Brighter. When I met them in the hospital, they were sweet. But there was a sadness in their eyes. Now they really seem happy. Michael looked over at the girls in the living room. Sarah was reading a story to Grace and her doll, Joy. They changed my life, he said softly. How? Before them, I lived only for work. Woke up, went to the office, came home, slept. Every day the same. Now, Michael smiled. Now I have a reason to come home early. I have someone asking me how my day was. I have laughter echoing in the halls. Jessica nodded. They have that power to transform people. Jessica, Michael said seriously, may I ask you something? Sure. How many kids like Sarah and Grace are out there? Jessica sighed. A lot, Michael, far too many. And what happens to them? Most of them stay invisible. They live on the streets until they grow up or until they can't anymore. Michael stayed quiet for a moment. That bothers me. It should bother everyone. Do you think it's possible to do something? Jessica looked at him curiously. Like what? I'm not sure. A project, a foundation, something to help more children like them. Jessica's eyes lit up. Are you serious? Completely. Jessica leaned forward. Michael, I've been working in social services for 10 years. I've always dreamed of creating something bigger, more effective. Then let's create it. It would be a huge effort. I have time and resources, and I have experience and contacts, Jessica added, excited. They were both silent for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. How would it look? Jessica asked. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe a shelter, or multiple shelters. Places where kids like Sarah and Grace can be safe while we look for families for them, or while preparing them for adulthood if families aren't found. Exactly. With schooling, medical care, psychological support. Jessica grew more animated. We could have a team of social workers searching for kids on the streets, bringing them to a safe place. And responsible adoption programs so they can find real families. Michael, this is incredible. From the living room, Grace yelled, Jessica! Come see how Joy sits down. Jessica and Michael went to the living room. Grace had placed her doll in a small chair with a book on her lap. She likes to read, just like me, Grace explained. So smart, Jessica said, sitting on the floor next to the girls. Sarah was drawing in the sketchbook Michael had bought. She was drawing a big house with many windows and a red door. What a pretty drawing, Jessica commented. What is it? A house for kids who have nowhere else to live, Sarah answered. Like we used to be. Jessica and Michael looked at each other, surprised. Why did you draw that? Michael asked. Sarah thought for a moment. Because if there's a house like that, other kids can be as happy as we are now. Grace came over to see the drawing. Can I draw the garden? Sure. While the girls drew together, Jessica whispered to Michael, They understand. What? The project. They know other kids need what they found here. Michael looked at the drawing. Sarah had sketched children playing in a garden, little smiles on their faces. What should we call the project? Jessica asked. Michael watched Sarah and Grace drawing, their heads close together. Two little girls who had shouted for help on a busy street and changed everyone's life around them. Small voices, he said suddenly. What? Small voices. Sarah and Grace shouted on the avenue until someone listened. Their small voices saved you and Logan, Jessica smiled. Small voices? I like it. But that's not all, Michael continued. They have huge hearts. Even after losing everything, they still care about others. Small voices, big hearts, Jessica concluded. Perfect. They stayed quiet, savoring the moment. A project was born that afternoon, inspired by two girls who turned tragedy into hope. When do we start? Jessica asked. Tomorrow, Michael answered. I'll talk to my lawyers about setting up a foundation. And I'll speak to my contacts in social services. I have colleagues who'd love to join something like this. Sarah looked up from her drawing. Michael, Jessica, do you want to have dinner with us? Of course, Jessica replied. What are we having? Michael makes really good pasta, Grace said proudly. Michael laughed. It's just pasta with tomato sauce. But it's delicious, Sarah insisted. That evening, the four of them ate together in the kitchen. Sarah and Grace talked about their new life, showed off their favorite books, chatted about the drawings they made. Jessica talked about Logan, who was growing and smiling more each day. Michael talked about how his life had changed since the girls arrived. When Jessica left, she hugged the girls warmly. Thank you for the gifts, Sarah said. Thank you for everything, Grace added. Thank you, Jessica replied, for giving me a family and now a purpose. After Jessica left, Michael helped the girls get ready for bed. They placed their new dolls, Hope and Joy, on their beds next to the teddy bears. Michael? Sarah called when he was about to turn off the lamp. Yes. We heard you talking about helping other kids. You did. We think it's a good idea, Grace said. You do. Everyone deserves a family, Sarah explained, just like we have now. Michael smiled. You two are amazing. We learned from you, Grace replied. That night, Michael went to bed with a full heart. He had a family, a purpose, and the certainty that his life would never be the same. Somewhere in the city, other children like Sarah and Grace were still waiting for their chance, but not for much longer. Small Voices, Big Hearts was about to be born. It all started on a Thursday morning. Grace woke up slower than usual, her cheeks flushed and her eyes glazed. My head hurts, she murmured when Sarah nudged her to get up. Sarah placed a hand on her sister's forehead. It was hot. Michael, Sarah shouted, running to the kitchen. Grace has a fever. Michael dropped his coffee immediately and went to the girls' room. Grace was lying there, hugging her doll Joy, looking small and fragile. Hey, little one, Michael said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. How do you feel? Tired, Grace replied softly. And cold. Michael touched her forehead. Definitely warm, but not alarming. Let's take your temperature, okay? He came back with a thermometer, 100.8 degree. A fever, but not too high. It's probably just a cold, you see, Michael told Sarah, who stood by the door looking worried. She'll be fine. But Sarah didn't seem convinced. Michael called the doctor, who confirmed it was common in kids, especially with the season change. Plenty of fluids, rest and some fever reducer if it went higher. "It's normal," Michael repeated to Sarah. "Grace will be better in a few days." Sarah nodded, but there was something in her eyes Michael couldn't decipher. During the day, Michael took care of Grace patiently. He made tea with honey, brought her soup, placed cool cloths on her forehead. Grace slept a lot, woke to drink water, then slept again. Sarah stayed close by, watching. She didn't play, read or draw. She just watched Grace sleep. "Sarah," Michael said in the afternoon, "want to eat something?" "I'm not hungry." "You need to eat. Later." By Monday, Grace still had a fever. Not high, but persistent. 99.9 degree Fahrenheit in the morning, 100.6 degree Fahrenheit in the afternoon. She ate little, slept a lot, and complained of a headache. Michael took her to the doctor. "It's viral," the doctor explained. "Sometimes it takes a week to fully pass. Keep her hydrated and resting." "You're sure it's nothing serious?" Michael asked. "Yes, it's a very common infection in children. If the fever goes above 102 degrees or she develops other symptoms, call me." Michael felt relieved, but when he looked at Sarah in the waiting room, she seemed even more tense. On the way home, Grace slept in the back seat. Sarah was silent, looking out the window. "Sarah, the doctor said she'll be fine," Michael said gently. Sarah didn't reply. By Tuesday, Grace was a bit better. Her fever dropped to 99.5 degrees, and she managed to eat half a bowl of soup. "I'm getting better," Grace said with a weak smile. Sarah forced a smile back, but Michael noticed how she watched Grace's every move, breath and sound. By Wednesday, the fever returned, 100.9 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning. Michael saw Sarah freeze when the thermometer beeped. "It's normal," he said quickly. "Sometimes the fever comes and goes, part of the process." But this time, Sarah left the room without a word. Michael found her on the balcony, sitting on the floor, hugging her knees. "Sarah?" She didn't look up. "Want to talk?" Sarah shook her head. Michael sat beside her. "You're scared." It wasn't a question. Sarah stayed silent, but he saw a tear rolling down her cheek. "Grace will be fine," Michael said softly. "How do you know?" Sarah asked, not looking at him. "Because the doctor said so. It's just a common virus. Mom started with a cold, too." The words were so quiet Michael almost didn't hear. "Sarah." First she started coughing, then came the fever. Then Sarah swallowed hard. Then she couldn't get out of bed anymore. Michael felt his heart ache. He'd forgotten. Sarah lost her mother to illness. To a child of 7, a fever could mean death. "Grace isn't going to die," he said firmly. Sarah finally looked at him, eyes full of unshed tears. "You can't be sure." "Yes, I can. Because Grace doesn't have the same illness your mom had." "How do you know?" "Because I took her to the doctor. He examined her. It's just a common virus, Sarah. Very different from what your mom had." Sarah hugged her knees again. "I can't lose her, too." "You won't. If I lose Grace, I'll be alone again." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Sarah wasn't just afraid of losing her sister. She was afraid of being abandoned all over again. "Sarah, even if something happened to Grace, which it won't, you wouldn't be alone." Sarah didn't respond. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" She shrugged. "I chose both of you, but I didn't just choose you as a pair. I chose you, Sarah, and I chose Grace. Each of you." The next 2 days were tough. Grace would improve in the morning, then feel worse in the afternoon. Sarah barely ate or slept, staying close to her sister like a shadow. Michael cared for them both, giving Grace her medicine, trying to convince Sarah to eat. By Friday night, Grace was finally better. Her fever had vanished in the morning and hadn't returned. She ate a whole bowl of soup and even laughed at one of Michael's jokes. "I think the worst is over," Michael told Sarah. Sarah nodded, but still looked tense. When Grace fell asleep, Sarah sat on the bed next to her, watching. "Sarah," Michael said softly, "Grace is fine. You can go sleep in your own bed. I want to stay here." "All right." Michael brought a blanket and draped it over Sarah's shoulders. He was about to leave the room when he heard her quiet voice. "Michael?" "Yes?" Sarah still didn't look at him. She kept her gaze on Grace, sleeping. "If Grace dies, will you send me away?" The question cut through the silence like a knife. Michael sat on Sarah's bed and pulled her close. "Sarah, look at me." She raised her eyes, and Michael saw all the fear she'd been bottling up for days. "Grace isn't going to die," he said firmly. "But even if something happened to her, which it won't, I would never ever send you away." Sarah searched his face for any lies. "If one day you're alone," Michael continued, holding her small hand, "I'll be there by your side. I chose both of you, forever. Even if it's just me. Even if it's just you." "Why?" Michael thought of his answer. "Because you're not just Grace's sister. You're Sarah. You're brave, smart, caring. You're special all on your own." Sarah felt something release inside her, a tension she'd carried for years. "I'm afraid of being alone again," she whispered. "You'll never be alone again," Michael promised. "Never." For the first time that week, Sarah really cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. Michael held her, letting her cry until she was exhausted. "I'll take care of you forever," he whispered. "No matter what happens, you have a real family now. Even if Grace isn't here, even then, but Grace is here. She's fine, Sarah. She's sleeping, breathing normally, and tomorrow she'll wake up asking for pancakes." Sarah smiled through her tears. "She loves pancakes. Then we'll make pancakes tomorrow." Sarah snuggled into Michael's embrace. For the first time since Grace had gotten sick, she felt safe. "Michael, thank you for not leaving me alone. Thank you for letting me take care of you." That night, Sarah finally slept, and for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to have someone who would never abandon her. No matter what happened, she had a real family forever. On Saturday morning, Grace woke up fever-free, smiling and asking for pancakes, just as Michael had predicted. Sarah laughed, a free, genuine laugh. The fear was gone, and with it, the last barrier in her heart. Michael was nervous. He'd spent the last 3 months dealing with lawyers, social workers, paperwork, interviews, all to get to today. The day Sarah and Grace would officially become his daughters. "You all right?" Sarah asked, noticing how restless he was in the back seat on the way to the courthouse. "I'm fine," Michael replied, straightening his tie for the 5th time. "Just a little anxious." "Why?" Grace asked. "We already live with you." Michael smiled. How could he explain to 2 kids that there was a difference between taking care of them and being legally responsible for them, between providing shelter and being a real father? "Because today, it all becomes official," he said simply. Sarah and Grace wore their nicest outfits. Sarah was in a navy blue dress Jessica had given her, Grace in a pink floral dress. They had brushed their hair until it shone, each carrying their rag dolls, Hope and Joy. "Are the dolls going too?" Michael asked. "Of course," Grace said. "They're part of the family." Family. It still sounded both strange and wonderful. At the courthouse, they were greeted by Mrs. Morrison, the social worker who had overseen the entire process. "Good morning, girls," she said warmly. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Sarah admitted. "That's normal. But today is a very happy day." The judge's chamber was smaller than Michael expected. There was a big desk, a few chairs, and flags on the wall. Judge Harrison was an older man with glasses who smiled when they walked in. "This must be the Carter family," he said. Michael felt something warm in his chest at those words. The Carter family. "Please have a seat." They sat before the judge's desk, Sarah and Grace on either side of Michael, holding their dolls. "Well," the judge began, looking through the papers in front of him, "we're here today to finalize the adoption of Sarah and Grace by Michael Carter." He looked at the girls. "Girls, do you understand what it means to be adopted?" Sarah nodded. "It means Michael will be our real father, and we'll be his real daughters," Grace added. "Exactly. And that means you'll have all the rights and responsibilities, just like any family." The judge turned to Michael. "Mr. Carter, Do you understand that you are fully accepting responsibility for these two children? That you'll be responsible for their physical, emotional, and financial well-being until they turn 18? I understand completely, Michael replied, and I accept completely. Even knowing this will change your life forever. Michael looked at Sarah and Grace. It already has. For the better, the judge smiled. I see here the girls have chosen to take your last name, is that correct? Sarah and Grace exchanged smiles. Yes, Sarah said. We want to be called Carter. Sarah Carter and Grace Carter, Grace said, testing the sound. I like it. Very well. The judge picked up a pen. I'm signing the official documents now. Michael held his breath as the judge signed paper after paper. Each signature made it more real. Done, the judge said finally. Sarah Carter and Grace Carter, you are now officially the daughters of Michael Carter. Grace clapped her hands. Sarah smiled, the biggest smile Michael had ever seen. For real? Sarah asked. We're really Carter now. For real, the judge confirmed. Congratulations to the new Carter family. Michael stood and hugged both girls at the same time. He felt tears in his eyes. Now I have two daughters, he said, his voice trembling. For real, and I'm never letting you go. Never? Grace asked. Never, Michael promised. You're my daughters forever. Sarah stepped back a bit, looking up at Michael. Does that mean if someone asks who our dad is, we can say it's you? Yes, you can, because it's true. And if we want to call you Dad? Grace asked softly. Michael's heart raced. The girls had always called him Michael. He'd never pushed them to change. You can call me whatever you want, he said gently. Grace thought for a moment. Dad Michael. Just Dad, Sarah corrected. He's our dad now. Dad, Grace repeated the word. I like it. Michael had to sit down. Hearing that little word, said with such affection, was more moving than any business deal he'd ever made. I like it too, he whispered. Mrs. Morrison approached with more papers. Here are the updated birth certificates, she explained. They now list Michael Carter as the legal father. Michael took the documents carefully. They read, Sarah Carter, daughter of Michael Carter. Grace Carter, daughter of Michael Carter. Can I see? Sarah asked. Michael showed her. Sarah read slowly, her finger tracing each word. Sarah Carter, she said out loud, daughter of Michael Carter. Grace Carter, Grace read from her own certificate, daughter of Michael Carter. They looked at each other and burst into laughter. We have the same last name as you, Grace said. We're a family on paper too, Sarah added. Michael laughed through his tears. You've always been family. Now it's just on paper too. Outside the courthouse, they took photos. Michael, Sarah, and Grace all smiling, holding the birth certificates. This one's going on the living room wall, Michael said, checking the photo on the camera. Next to our drawings, Grace asked. Next to your drawings. On the way home, the girls wouldn't stop talking. Can we tell Jessica? Sarah asked. Of course. She'll be so happy. And the owner of the bakery. He always asks for our full name. Tell whoever you want. Grace was hugging Joy. Now Joy is a Carter too, she said seriously. And Hope too, Sarah added. We're a family of 5, Michael laughed. A family of 5, I like that. At home, Michael hung the birth certificates on the living room wall next to the girls' drawings. Sarah and Grace stood there admiring them. It looks official now, Sarah said. It is official, Michael corrected. That night, at bedtime, the girls were especially excited. Dad, Grace said. She was still getting used to the word. Can you tell us a story? Sure. What kind of story? One about a family, Sarah said. A family like ours, Grace added. Michael sat on the bed between the two. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived alone in a big house. Who wasn't happy, Sarah interrupted. He wasn't happy, Michael agreed. Until one night, he heard 2 voices asking for help. Our voices, Grace said excitedly, the voices of 2 very special girls, and when he helped them, he realized he didn't want to live alone anymore. Then what? Sarah asked, even though she knew the ending. Then he asked them to come live with him, and they said yes. And they became a real family. With papers and everything, Grace added. With papers and everything, Michael confirmed. He said goodnight to them and went to his own room. But before sleeping, he stood in the doorway, watching. There were his daughters, Sarah Carter and Grace Carter, two girls who had come into his life like a miracle and changed everything. They weren't just two kids he was helping. They weren't guests in his home. They were his daughters, for real, forever. And for the first time in 10 years, Michael Carter felt completely at home. Because family isn't where you're born. It's where people choose to love you forever. And they had chosen him as much as he had chosen them. A real family. With a name, a home, and so much love. The auditorium was packed. Michael peeked from behind the curtain and felt his stomach tighten. Journalists, officials, business people, social workers, families interested in adoption. Over 300 people had come to the official launch of Small Voices, Big Hearts. Nervous? Jessica asked, coming up beside him. She wore a dark blue dress and held Logan in her arms, who at 8 months old was chubby and smiling. A bit, Michael admitted. How about you girls? Sarah and Grace were sitting in small chairs, wearing new dresses Jessica had made just for the occasion. Sarah in light blue, Grace in soft pink. They held hope and joy in their arms. I'm nervous, Grace said softly. It'll be fine, Sarah said, taking her sister's hand. We just need to tell our story. Our true story, Grace agreed. Michael knelt beside them. Are you sure you want to do this? You don't have to go on stage if you don't want to. We do, Sarah said firmly. Other kids need to know it's possible to find a family. And that there are good people in the world, Grace added. Michael smiled. In the 6 months since their official adoption, the girls had grown in many ways. They were still kids, playing and laughing. But there was a new wisdom in their eyes. Attention, said the event organizer. We start in 5 minutes. The Small Voices, Big Hearts project had become real faster than Michael and Jessica had imagined. With Michael's resources and Jessica's expertise, they'd secured partnerships with the government, private companies, and social organizations. The first shelter would open the next month, 20 rooms, each for 2 children, staffed 24 hours a day. And it was only the beginning. It's time, Jessica said, taking a deep breath. They walked out from behind the curtain and onto the stage. The audience gave polite applause. Michael approached the microphone first. Good afternoon, he began, his voice echoing through the auditorium. 6 months ago, I was just a single businessman who worked too much and lived alone. Soft laughter from the crowd. Today, I'm the father of 2 extraordinary girls. And I'm here to tell you how they not only changed my life, but inspired a project that will change the lives of hundreds of other children. Michael briefly recounted the night of the helicopter accident, finding Sarah and Grace yelling for help in the street, discovering they lived alone on the streets. But the best person to tell this story, he said, is the woman they saved, Jessica Martinez. Jessica came to the microphone, Logan sleeping peacefully in her arms. 6 months ago, I thought I was going to die, she began. My baby and I were trapped in a burning helicopter. I was unconscious. Logan was crying. There was no one around to help. The auditorium fell silent, except for 2 little girls, 2 kids who slept in a vacant lot, who had nothing, who lived alone in the world. Jessica looked at Sarah and Grace, sitting on the stage. They could have ignored it. They could have run away. They were just children, and it was dangerous. But they didn't. Jessica's voice grew stronger. They ran to the avenue. They shouted for help. They stood there in the middle of the street until someone stopped. And when Michael stopped, they didn't ask for anything for themselves. They only asked him to save us. Some people in the crowd were visibly moved. Sarah was 7, Grace 6. Orphans, homeless, invisible to the world. Yet that night, Jessica paused, looking at the girls. That night they screamed, and the world heard them. The auditorium was completely silent. They screamed because they knew 2 lives depended on it. They screamed because, even having lost everything, they still cared about other people. They screamed because they had small voices, but huge hearts. Jessica turned to the audience. And that's why we're here today, Because there are hundreds, thousands of children like Sarah and Grace, children who scream, but no one hears, children with small voices, but giant hearts. The emotion in her voice was contagious. The small voices. Big Hearts Project exists because two little girls showed me that it doesn't matter how small you are, or how little you have, you can always make a difference in someone's life. Jessica beckoned Sarah and Grace to come forward. I'd like you to meet these two heroines. Sarah and Grace walked hesitantly to the microphone. The auditorium applauded warmly. Hi, Sarah said softly into the microphone. I'm Sarah Carter. And I'm Grace Carter, Grace added, even more timid. Do you want to share a bit of your story? Jessica encouraged. Sarah took a deep breath. We lived on the streets after our mom died. It was really hard. We were hungry, cold, scared. But we always took care of each other, Grace added. And when we saw the helicopter crash, Sarah went on, we knew there were people inside who needed help. Just like we needed help, Grace said. So we ran to get someone. Lots of cars passed by without stopping, but Michael stopped. Sarah looked over at Michael at the side of the stage, and he didn't just help that day. He gave us a family. Grace moved closer to the microphone. Now we have a dad, a home, toys, books, but the most important thing is that now we know we'll never be alone again. And we want other kids to have that too, Sarah said. That's why this project exists, Grace concluded. Jessica returned to the mic. Sarah and Grace don't know this yet, but the first shelter of the project will bear their names, Sarah House and Grace House, so we never forget that courage has no age and heroes can come in any size. The auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Sarah and Grace blushed but smiled. Michael joined them on stage. These two girls taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about never giving up. He put a hand on each girl's shoulder. They chose to save Jessica and Logan that night. I chose to save them, too. And now, together, we choose to save other children. After the event, journalists crowded around Michael, Jessica, and the girls. The questions were many. How does it feel to be heroes? One reporter asked Sarah. We don't feel like heroes, Sarah answered honestly. We just did what we had to do. Anyone would do it, Grace added, but not everyone did. Another reporter pointed out. Several cars drove past you that night. Sarah thought for a moment. Maybe they didn't know how to help. Or maybe they were afraid. We understand that. But we never stopped trying, Grace said, even when it seemed like no one would stop. Is that your message to other kids in a similar situation? A journalist asked. Never give up, Sarah said firmly. Someone will hear, someone will care. And never be afraid to ask for help, Grace added. Sometimes good people are just waiting for you to shout loud enough. The next day, newspapers were full of articles about the project, but one headline in particular caught Michael's eye, and he kept it. Courage has a sound, and it starts small. The piece recounted the entire story, from the helicopter crash to the project's launch. It had photos of Sarah and Grace on stage, of Michael hugging them, of Jessica with Logan. Look, Dad, Grace said, pointing at the photo in the newspaper. We're in the news. You sure are, Michael smiled. The whole world will know your story. And the project, Sarah added. How many kids do you think will help? A lot, Michael replied. Thanks to you two. Sarah and Grace looked at each other and smiled. Thanks to everyone, Sarah corrected. You, Jessica, Logan, all those people who came yesterday. That's right, Grace agreed. We screamed, but everyone listened together. Michael hugged them both. And we'll keep shouting until there are no more kids alone in the world. Promise, Grace asked. I promise. And in that moment, Michael knew that promise would be kept, because when small voices join big hearts, miracles happen. And the greatest miracle of all is when a family is born out of love, grows through hope, and multiplies into other families, small voices, big hearts, and a world that finally learned to listen. Sarah and Grace were at school. Michael glanced at the clock. 3 in the afternoon. They'd be back by 5. Enough time for the surprise. For 2 weeks, he'd been planning this in secret. Ever since the success of the Small Voices, Big Hearts event, life had gotten a bit hectic. Interviews, meetings, journalist visits. The girls were patient, but Michael realized they needed something just for them. A space just to be kids. Michael opened the door to the spare room next to his office. It had been empty for months, just storing boxes, but today it was going to be transformed. The decorating team arrived promptly at 3:30. Mr. Carter, the designer, a young woman named Marina, walked in with fabric samples. "We brought everything as discussed." Michael smiled. "Perfect. You have an hour and a half." "More than enough. Let's begin." Michael watched them work. First came the rugs, a large, round, rainbow-colored rug in the center, soft as a cloud. Then smaller ones around the edges, each with different patterns: butterflies, flowers, stars. "The shelves go here," Marina indicated, placing 2 low bookshelves against the side walls, one for books, the other for games and toys. Michael had chosen everything himself: storybooks, coloring books, animal books, board games, puzzles, building blocks, and toys, different dolls than they already had, cars, stuffed animals, a fully furnished dollhouse. "And here," Marina went on, "we'll put the dress-up trunk." The trunk was white with colorful flowers painted on it. Inside, Michael had placed princess dresses, superhero capes, funny hats, masks, magic wands. "They're going to love it," one of the decorators said, arranging the costumes in the trunk. "I hope so," Michael replied. On the walls, they hung cheerful pictures, smiling animals, bright landscapes, motivational phrases in big, colorful letters. "Dreaming is the first step. You are special. Family is love." In the corner by the window, they put a small round table with 2 chairs for drawing and homework. Beside it, a big comfy armchair where Michael could sit and read them stories. "All done," Marina said at 5 minutes to 5. "What do you think?" Michael looked around, his heart clenching with emotion. The room had turned into a true children's paradise. Bright colors, soft textures, everything tidy and inviting. "It's perfect," he said. "Thank you." The team packed up quickly and left. Michael stayed in the room alone, imagining the girls' reaction. At 5 o'clock sharp, he heard the key in the door. "Dad, we're home," Grace called. "I'm here," Michael answered, closing the playroom door behind him. Sarah and Grace ran in, throwing their backpacks on the couch. "How was school?" Michael asked, kissing both their foreheads. "Great," Sarah said. "The teacher said my drawing for the project was really good. And I learned a new song," Grace added. "Want to hear?" "I do, but first, I have a surprise for you." The girls' eyes lit up immediately. "What kind of surprise?" Sarah asked, trying to sound skeptical but clearly excited. "Come see," Michael said, walking toward the hallway. Sarah and Grace followed him curiously. Michael stopped at the door of the old storage room. "Close your eyes," he said. "Again." Grace laughed. "Just like when you showed us our bedroom." "Yes, but this time it's different." The girls closed their eyes, smiles of anticipation on their faces. Michael opened the door slowly. "Open them!" Sarah and Grace opened their eyes and froze for a few seconds. The room sparkled with color and possibility. The rugs beckoned them to sit and play. The shelves overflowed with treasures. The costume trunk hinted at 1,000 adventures. "Oh my goodness," Sarah whispered. Grace said nothing. She just ran to the center of the room and flopped onto the rainbow rug, laughing. "Is this all for us?" Sarah asked, still standing in the doorway as if she couldn't believe it. "Yes," Michael replied, smiling. "Now you can play without worry." Sarah walked in slowly, touching everything gently, the bookshelf, the drawing table, the comfy armchair. "Without worry about what?" she asked. Michael knelt beside her. "Without worrying that someone will take it away, without worrying it's temporary, without worrying you don't deserve it." Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining. "We deserve it. You deserve this and so much more." Grace had already discovered the costume trunk. "Sarah, look. There's a princess dress." Sarah ran over to her sister. They began pulling out costumes, laughing and trying on funny hats. "This one's perfect for you," Grace said, placing a golden crown on Sarah's head. "And this one's yours," Sarah replied, wrapping Grace in a sparkly red cape. Michael sat in the armchair, watching. The girls ran around the room, exploring every corner. They picked up books, opened games, hugged new stuffed animals. "Look at this," Grace shouted, finding the dollhouse. "It has tiny furniture." "And look at all these books," Sarah said, running her finger along the colorful spines on the shelf. They played for hours, dressing up as princesses, putting on a pretend show, building towers with blocks, reading books together on the rug, drawing at the little table. Michael never left the room. Sometimes he joined in, sometimes he just watched with his heart full of joy. "Dad," Grace said at one point, pausing in the middle of a game. "Thank you. Thank you for what? For all this, for letting us be kids." Michael felt tears in his eyes. "You've always been kids. But now we can really play," Sarah said, "without worrying about anything. Without having to grow up too fast," Grace added. Michael hugged them both. "You can play as long as you want. You can be kids as long as you need." As evening fell, the girls' laughter echoed through the house, free, untroubled laughter full of pure joy. This big apartment, once silent and empty, was now alive. Every corner had a sound, every hallway had movement. It was no longer just a fancy, well-decorated place, it was a complete home. Around 8 at night, after dinner, the three of them sat on the balcony. It was a quiet autumn evening, with a gentle breeze and a sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Michael had made hot chocolate for all, a new tradition they'd started a few weeks ago. Sarah and Grace held their favorite mugs, warming their small hands. No visitors were expected. No important calls to take. No frantic schedules or urgent appointments. Just the three of them at peace. "What did you like most about the playroom?" Michael asked, settling into a chair beside the girls. "Everything," Grace said immediately. "But I think what I liked most was the feeling." "What feeling?" Grace pondered for a moment. "The feeling that it's really ours." "Actually ours," Sarah nodded. "When we lived on the streets, sometimes we found thrown-away toys. We'd play a little, but always worried someone would appear and say they weren't ours. Now we know it's ours," Grace continued, "and no one's going to take it away." Michael sipped his hot chocolate, thinking about their words. How could two small children have such profound wisdom? "You know what I learned from you?" he asked. "What?" Sarah asked, curious. "That family isn't just about sharing a last name or living in the same house." "It's not," Grace wondered. "No. Family is about being there for the important moments. And also the simple ones, like this." Michael looked at the two girls beside him, mugs of hot chocolate in their hands, hair messy after an afternoon of fun. "Family is whoever stays," he said softly, "and I'm staying with you." Sarah didn't say anything. She just moved closer to Michael's chair and rested her head on his shoulder. Grace scooted closer from the other side and took his hand. "Forever?" Grace asked quietly. "Forever," Michael confirmed. They stayed like that for a long while, wrapped in a comfortable silence. The sky slowly darkened, and the first stars appeared. "Dad?" Sarah said, not lifting her head from his shoulder. Before we met you, I thought family was just who you're born to. And now I know family is who chooses to stay together." Michael smiled in the dim light. "Exactly. And you chose us," Grace said, squeezing his hand. "And you chose me, too." Sarah lifted her head, gazing at him. "That was the best choice we've ever made." Michael felt his heart overflow with love. Right there, on that simple balcony, with two girls who had come into his life like a miracle, he understood the true meaning of fulfillment. They weren't just three people living together. They were three hearts beating in the same rhythm. Three lives intertwined into something greater than the sum of its parts. "You know what else?" Michael said. "What?" "This apartment was just a place to live before you came. Now it's a home." Grace smiled. "Because there's love inside." "And laughter," Sarah added. "And hot chocolate on the balcony." Grace giggled. "And a playroom," Sarah finished. Michael chuckled. "And two girls who turned a lonely man into a happy dad." They went back inside when the air grew chilly. In the playroom, Michael helped the girls put away some toys, but left others scattered. After all, it was meant for playing. "Can we play again tomorrow?" Grace asked. "Every day," Michael answered. "That's what it's for." At bedtime, Sarah and Grace went to their room but returned a few minutes later. "Dad," Sarah said, "can we all sleep together tonight?" "In my bed?" Michael asked, surprised. "Yeah," Grace said, "like a family sleepover." Michael smiled. Why not? They settled into Michael's big bed, the girls on either side of him. Sarah clung to hope, Grace to joy. "Dad?" Grace whispered in the dark. "Yes. Today was the best day of my life." "Mine too," Sarah agreed. Michael stared at the ceiling, a child drifting off on each arm. "Mine too," he whispered. And that night, for the first time since they'd moved in, the big apartment had no empty or silent corners. Every room had a purpose. Every hallway a story. Every corner loved 3 hearts, 1 home. A complete family finally at home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.